Hello everyone, this is Tim, and this is going to be a quick review of the Witch RPG packet that I was given by Liz C. I went over a lot of the materials and jotted down some notes about what I thought of the material, and I'm just going to go over that with you quickly. But before that, I'm going to show you some of the things again that I showed you in the unboxing video. Some stickers that we were given, the bear with the antlers, I like that one a lot, and the heart in the box. Alright, so first off, this was the packet that I was sent. Just a printout of various things for the game, an adventure, how things work, but it doesn't go into a lot of detail about everything. They're going to be having a Kickstarter in March, and I'm sure that a lot more of the details will be put into the game then. We'll be able to put more art in and various things if the Kickstarter is successful. So I don't have a link for the Kickstarter, but when I do, I'll put that down in the description down below. So, Witch. We talked in the unboxing video about how this game is about characters who have sold their soul to a demon or some other supernatural being in return for some sort of power. And I think the biggest strength of this game is that deal between the devil and the character isn't just a one-time thing. It is an ongoing relationship. This is something that a GM storyteller can weave into a campaign or chronicle, whatever you want to call it, and that demon can show up again. To get more and more power, you need to make more deals. You need to do darker deeds. The things that the demon will ask you, I'm sure, will make a lot of people squeamish, fill the character with a lot of guilt, perhaps, unless they are just totally power-driven. So, with that said, it makes me think, if I was going to play a character like that, it would be very interesting. It would be cool to see, first off, what the demon was like, or at least what appearance it gave to the character. I'm sure that could perhaps change over time, or whatever the demon wanted to show a character. That's what mask they would wear at that time. It made me think about Spawn and some of the things around that comic book, the demons and the darkness, and a character may be trying to do good with those powers, even though the source of that power is corrupt and evil. Maybe something, this relationship that you have with this demon, there's a lot of freedom here for a GM to come up with some really just awful situations, where maybe you're required to kill someone or deliver a package that blows people up, as Liz said in one of her recent videos. Some sort of terrorist act. So there's a lot of room there. I think that is probably Witch's strongest point, is that ongoing relationship with that demon. As far as the game itself, or at least the packet, we were given several character sheets, and I took them out and stapled them together. But they go through and they show you what different types of witches you could play. Like a druid, or a pagan, the yokai, the bokor, the djinn, and the lich. And I like that they use terms that invoke things. They invoke feelings and thoughts, make you think a little bit about maybe what they're like, what they're into. And each of them is different in their own way, and some of those differences will affect the personality of the character, but it's not as cut and dry in that. If you have an idea for a character, it doesn't have to suit the type of witch that you pick, the type of demon that witch is associated with. So there is a lot of flexibility there for different types of characters, different types of stories, and again, I think that's one of the strengths of the system. The dice mechanic for Witch is very simple. It's something that I think a lot of people would be familiar with. It's a d20 plus an attribute rank, plus a skill rank or talent rank. So basically it's a lot like the d20 system, and I believe that Red Dice Diaries and the Rogue DM had talked a little bit about this and how they might look at that as maybe not being a great thing, but the way I look at it is that is a mechanic that a lot of people are familiar with. So that familiarity with that sort of mechanic is a good thing. They know what to expect, they're used to it, they probably played a lot of games with that mechanic, so you can use that to the benefit of the players and the GM and get the ball moving quicker. You don't have to go into lengthy discussion about how the dice work if they're already familiar with that mechanic. Opposed rolls, higher wins. That's very common in a lot of RPGs. There are difficulty classes. The average is 11, and it goes up depending on what the storyteller GM decides is a good target number to reach. Initiative is D20 plus Dex or Perception, whichever is higher. And this is where you start to see some of the White Wolf influence, I think, on the system. Is that it's a White Wolf thing, pretty much. You can move, you have one move action and a combat action, again, sort of D20-ish. And small or quick actions are free. So there's a lot of things that you can come up with as a player saying, I'm going to do this little thing, is that okay? So I'm sure there can be some give and take with the GM, and they can say, yeah, that's fine. There's difficult number to hit. Again, it's kind of like D20 mashed with World of Darkness. Armor is damage reduction, and there are hit points in the game, but I like how they do hit points. They sort of combine the health levels of World of Darkness with the hit points of D20. So in D20, you really don't have any ill effects until you get down to 1 or 0. So there's a lot of people that have complained about that. But in this system, there's a certain percentage of your hit points. Whenever you lose them out of that first health level, it affects you. It gives you some sort of negative penalty to various rolls and such. So I like how they do that, and in fact, I think it would be a good way to house rule D20 game, for instance. So, good job, Liz. I think it's a cool little part of the game. And you subtract damage from the highest damage level. So you start at the top. Whenever all the hit points are out of that damage level, you go on to the next one. There's touch attacks. Most actions are attribute, rank, plus skill. Spells are taught by the demon who fated you. And again, the characters are called the fated because of their deal with the devil. Your spells are dependent on what type of fate you are, what type of demon you have gone into a deal with. So all of the spells for the different, like the druids, the djinns, etc., they're all different. So I'm glad that they did that, and there's not just like a generic pool of spells. So each character is going to have a very different feel. And it almost reminds me of the schools in Dungeons and Dragons of the different types of evocation and so forth spells. Divination, for instance. They're all going to be different, and I like that. I like that it's depending on who is at the table, what characters are there, it can have a very different feel. Let's see here. To cast, it's the casting roll. What's cool about casting in this game is that you don't have a number of spells per day, but the more you use a single spell, so let's say, they don't have a fireball spell, but let's say you would use a fireball spell over and over and over again. Every time you use that spell, it becomes riskier and riskier. There's a chance, like a fumble chance, that increasingly gets higher every time you cast the same spell in a day. And I love this because it can have horrible consequences if you fumble. You can rip a hole in space and time and let all kinds of evil beings, belch forth into the world. I like fumbles. I like this idea because it puts the onus on the player to decide how risky they want to be. Are they going to play it safe? Or are they going to go balls to the wall and just, if they mess up, oh well, we'll deal and clean up with the mess afterwards. So props to Liz and the design team for this sort of idea. I like how that's designed. In addition to spells, there are talents, and there are 6 of them that you can study. And these are sort of the things that aren't necessarily spells, but sort of sections of lore that your fated character can study. They're avenues of pursuit, different specialties is perhaps another way to put it. You can start out with a talent focus in one of them and acquire more through the course of play. They shape the way you wield magic. Just one more note on the dice mechanic. If you roll a 1 ever on D20, it's an automatic fumble, botch, etc. So I think, again, I enjoy that in systems, so I'm glad to see it here. The next section I'm going to talk about is the types of fated. I mentioned the various types of demons you can be associated with, and that basically tells you what kind of fated you're going to be. So you could be a pagan. They're the most versatile. They're known for being negotiators. They are tormented, cruel, especially their masters. Their demons that they fate themselves to are known to be exceptionally cruel. You have a familiar, so that's one way of Italian pagan. Druids, they're lore keepers and warriors. They're pacts with demons of Nador or Durla. Powers granted over natural forces and elementals for these, and elements. The Jinn, they live by a code and enforce it, and they serve the quiet. And this is a sort of nebulous enigma, sort of demonic force, so it's not as cut and dry and easily to describe as some of the other demons. But this force supposedly surrounds the world, and it is hungry for wishes and souls. So again, it's bringing some of that Jinn flavor from mythology. The yokai are shape changers, and their form changes with their mood. They can choose to take different forms, whatever suits their fancy. The Bokor are tricksters, fated by spirits called the Loa, who live in the underworld. It's basically a plane that forms a thin membrane over our own. So it's sort of like a different plane of existence. They don't think that these Loa are demons, but they have control over the dead, and they, like to play pranks. And again, these are sort of all stereotypes, and your character doesn't necessarily have to be the same as these descriptions. Lastly, there's the Lich, devoted to study, and they strive to be a paragon of their chosen field. So they pick a specialty, and they really just obsessively work towards that goal. They usually collect information, some are bookish, and some are explorers. They talk a little bit about the setting, and the setting is sort of interspersed in little sections throughout this packet. And it seems like they've spent a lot of work in putting various things from mythology, twisting it a little bit, and making it sort of like an alternate history of our world. There's different things going on. Again, this sort of reminds me of World of Darkness a little bit, but they seem to have their own spin on it. It's a little bit more fantastical, and I'm looking forward to seeing the final product, how much work they're going to put into it, what the final setting is going to be. It's something that I think you could pull a lot of mythology and natural, I was going to say natural resources, but natural lore from the world, history, mythology. You can really go down to the library and find a lot of influence for your campaign if you're going to run this game, and that's a good thing, I think. You find a dictionary, just a big book or tome of non-fiction knowledge about the world, maybe some supernatural, Time Life book series. You can have a lot of fun and interject a lot of that stuff into your campaign. The Promise of Nancy was made by all the Fated in 1360 in Nancy, France, when a large number of witches died. There were 5 promises that were made. Do not kill another who is fated. Do not bind another witch or warlock to yourself. Help other fated. Hide your powers and don't use them openly for others to see. And respect a blood pact. And these kind of remind me of Vampire the Masquerade and trying to hide all the supernaturalness from the mundane and more scientific world. There are a few fated that don't exist anymore, like types of fated, and that's probably because the demons took less of an interest in the world, or they don't exist anymore, or they just have stopped giving those powers to mortals. Paragons are master of their specific type of specialty as a witch or warlock. The Fellows are an elite hunter group that go out there and try to kill these people that are using spells and so forth. And there's other details that were sort of littered in the adventure that I thought brought a little bit of the setting flair, the flavor out of it. And I think when it's all said and done, when the setting is laid out and described in a book, I think it's going to be a very interesting setting, a sort of alternate version of our world, more supernatural, things are going on, the sort of war between heaven and hell maybe isn't really in there, but the aspect of the demon influencing the real world definitely, I think, will come up time and time again in a campaign. I think that situation with that ongoing relationship with the demon is going to be something that will have some great impact on a campaign. There's going to be a lot of role-playing situations that come out of that. I can see a lot of interaction between the demon and your character, the other characters and their demons, and all of the various sub-stories and difficulties that come about because of that. So I'm looking forward to seeing the final thing, how it's all going to work together. There's a council of witches and warlocks that sort of govern everything. There's one member of each fate that is in this council, so they represent the different types of witches and warlocks that are out there. I mentioned about there being vampires and hunters and things like that, and it wouldn't be surprising if there's other types of supernatural creatures that exist as well, maybe not in large numbers. You know, I'm sure that the witches could interact with those types of things. There were fate wars a long time ago where the different fates warred with one another and you know, backstabbed and, you know, betrayed each other, and, you know, a lot of that stuff is great for a campaign. You know, perhaps you could set it up that one fate doesn't like another fate, so that might pose some inner party conflict, which I think is always good, you know, when it's in a limited amount in a campaign. But, you know, if you have a few characters, a few players, I think that stuff is great. You know, you can delve into individual storylines and, you know, have them split apart and maybe come back together. It doesn't work out so well when you have a lot of characters, a lot of players, but, you know, I love interpersonal conflict, and I think this game could have a lot of that. The only thing I notice about the pre-gens in this packet, this will, I guess, be a little bit of a negative, is that it doesn't really go into the details on who the demons are that they have a relationship with. The adventure itself doesn't really deal with that either. You know, I think that's probably something that's more of a campaign thing than a one-shot thing. You know, this adventure is more like a one-shot or maybe a two-shot, depending on how fast they go through it. But that's something that I think, you know, when the final game comes out, they're definitely going to show you the demons, what they're like, what their specialties are, their powers, what they can perhaps do to influence the characters, to set them up for a fall. When I was reading through everything, it reminded me of a classic story called The Monk, where this monk sells his soul to the devil, you know, for power and influence, and, you know, he really just wants to have a sexual relationship and keep it hidden. And it's a wonderful story. It just sort of reminded me of this, of the tragedy and the possible destruction of the characters. And I love that. I love tragedy in stories. I love when things just fall apart. And I think this game is set up to be something that could be like that. Yes, the characters are very powerful, but that power is corrupted, and I think it will sort of taint them over time and perhaps take away their humanity, especially if they're doing a lot of these horrible, sinister things for their demons over time. I think it's just going to just whittle away at who they are, what they're like, their personality. It's going to change them for the worse. So, Witch, thank you very much for sending me, Liz. I look forward to seeing your project be successful, and I wish you good luck to you and everyone that's a part of it. So, Witch, I'll put all the links down below that I have, and I'll update the links when the Kickstarter goes live in March. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you guys later.